I don't need the mic. Are we ready? Are we started? Yeah. Okay. When I first became a devotee, I attended a class up in Granada Hills in northern Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley. And in that class, my guru was there. And he spoke about a verse, famous verse in the Gita. I was 17. I attended classes, from the time I was 16 at the temple every week, but I don't remember a whole lot about them. I would listen to a class and I'd get a snippet, maybe an inspirational line, like almost like a one-liner or some small, concise lesson. But I wasn't able to catch the whole thing. It was just too much information. The whole thing was too new to me. When I first came in the temple, I didn't know there were deities. I went and stood in front of the altar, and I just sort of saw colors and smells and sounds, but I didn't actually make out that there were deities on the altar. It was just too overwhelming for me. I had an experience of this sacred altar, but not that there were forms on the altar. The forms were dressed. It was just a melange of colors, so on and so forth. I meet people like this now in my life. I'll say, "What did you think of my class?" And they'll say, "Oh, you said you got to cultivate compassion. Oh yeah, you got to tolerate stuff." And they'll take one single statement I made, and that'll be what they got out of the class. Although I might have gone on a whole journey. Just one little snapshot, but that's what they got. When I listen now to my teachers, I try to remember everything they said in the order they said it and look for the thread of continuity and try to broaden myself so I can hold on to all of it, even though it's big. Anyway, my guru gave a class. His class was on a famous verse. Karmanasya pi bodhavyam shavi karmanaha akarmanasya bodhavyam gahana karmanogati. It's a famous verse in the Gita. Bodhavyam means to be understood. It's repeated 3 times. Karmanasya hyapi bodhavyam. Certainly, karma should be understood. Bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha, and what should not be done should be understood. Karma means action. In English, we have karma as a loan word. It means reaction, but in Sanskrit, karma means action. If you ask somebody, I've been signed out because my account's signed in from another device. We'll leave that alone. Madhurya Leela, can you show me your face? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Thank you. The verse is about karma, which means action. If you ask somebody, you're good. You can disappear if you want to. I like seeing you, but it's up to you. It's really up to you. The verse says that you should. Bodhavya means it is to be understood. Which is a fancy. And so you should understand. It's another way of saying you should do it. You should understand karma, vikarma, and akarma. Akarma means inaction. Vikarma means forbidden action. And karma means action. If you ask somebody, what's your karma? In Sanskrit, it means what's your job. Karma means action. What should you do? What should you not do? And what is inaction, which could be either... inaction is pretty easy to define. You just don't do anything. But inaction is a little more complicated than that. It's when you may act, but that acting doesn't have any reaction. It could also mean when you don't do anything. And sometimes, not doing something, sometimes if you don't do anything, you've done something bad, like with crimes of negligence. If you don't feed your children, it's negligence. And so there are sometimes good Samaritan laws in a country where if you see an accident, you're obliged to stop and help somebody in distress. If you don't do so, you're guilty of a crime. So sometimes not doing anything itself becomes a criminal act. All it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. And so if you don't do anything, you're complicit. Silence is not golden, but silence is assent. Silence is consent. There's a statement like that. What is it? Silence is consent. If you don't say anything. When you vote parliamentary procedure, you can vote yay or nay. You can vote for or against something. You can also abstain. Abstention, sometimes, like if people, for instance, if there was some horrific crime being done by a country and the people who are in the Senate refuse to vote and they abstain, that would be, it is viewed. Sometimes people don't vote on something, or they abstain, or they vote the wrong, they don't do anything, they just kind of keep their hands off, but it's viewed as being weak, corrupt. Because silence is consent. Because all it takes for evil to succeed is for good people to do nothing. Because there's crimes and negligence. Because there's good Samaritan laws. So, what is inaction? How can inaction actually be bad? And then on the other, that's one part. And then the other part is, how can you act in a way which is free from karma, even though you're doing something? You're navigating, gliding effortlessly through life. This is the verse he spoke of. I don't really remember the verse. And in the last, so it says you have to understand these three things. That says Gahana Karma Nogati. The path of karma is profound, difficult to understand, intricate. And in fact, people have a problem with this. They have a problem knowing what should you do. I think one of the things the Hare Krishna movement did for me was it largely got rid of the question of what should I do with my life, which is a pretty major thing to get answered when you're 16, 17, 18 years old. But pretty much since I was 18 years old, I haven't really questioned what I should be doing with my life. Or if I ever do question it, I end up being really happy I'm doing what I'm doing with my life. Or if I ever deviate, it becomes really clear really quick. It's a huge gift that the Vedic scriptures and our tradition gives to humanity, really. I don't think we're the only people who can do it, but our tradition certainly does an excellent job of it. Prabhupada one time said, I've come here to teach you what you've forgotten. And one time he said, I've come here to put a head on society, to give a head to society. In the Rig Veda, there's a Purusha Sukta. It's an ancient prayer to God, to the Supreme Being. And it talks about the Kshatriyas being the arms of God and the Vaishyas being the belly. The mercantile class that provides food is the belly. And the warriors are the arms that protect, and the Shudras are the legs, they do the work, and the Brahmanas are the head. And so when Prabhupada said this, I've come to give a head to society, what he meant was he came to teach us how to think and problem solve, but he was also participating in a very, very old Vedic text, like from the old Veda, from the oldest Veda. Anyway, that's one of the things the Hare Krishna movement does. It teaches you how to think and what's valuable. Really, it teaches what's valuable in life, what's worth cultivating. You might have some details like when should I get married, who should I get married to, where should I live, what should my career be. But those are kind of minor questions of life. Who should I be? What should I stand for? What's valuable? What's important? Those are the big questions of life. If you answer all the small questions of life and you haven't answered the big ones, you're an idiot and you're miserable. If you've answered the big questions of life and you got some doubts about the small ones, it's just maybe you got to tie your shoes and pick up some stuff. Like the whole house is clean, but you got to pick up a couple things on the floor and tie your shoes and you're good to go. As opposed to the foundations not set properly and the whole house is the Leaning Tower of Pisa and it's like the whole thing's about to fall apart. Big questions in life. Who am I? What should I stand for? What's valuable? What's my purpose? Why was I put on this earth? Mark Twain said that the two most valuable days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. The Hare Krishna movement teaches you why you were born. You're born, simply put, you're born to love Krishna. And by loving Krishna, love all of humanity. You're born to cultivate a service relationship with Krishna, and by doing so you do the best thing for all of humanity and the whole world and all animals and plants and trees and yourself and your loved ones and everybody else. The Mahabharata says you sacrifice an individual for the village, a village for the nation, and the whole world for the soul. It also answers that one. It also has you doing the biggest thing, which is looking at yourself as an eternal being and who you are fundamentally, primordially, in your most basic congruence. Who are you? Sometimes devotees they don't value this as enough because it gets handed on a silver platter and they don't realize what a rare gift it is. But it's the greatest gift. It's a gift that can help you survive any loss. It's a gift that can help you thrive in any environment. It's the ultimate gift. Anyway, my guru gave me a class on karma, vikarma, and akarma on this verse. I got something out of it, but I got just a little tiny piece because I wasn't able to broaden myself to understand what anybody was saying in those days. And so I got little vignettes, little cool slogans from any given class. All that it takes for you to see as a group of people to do nothing. Silence is consent, If you have nothing to live for, if you have something you're worth dying for, you have nothing to live for. Little things like that would stick out at me, but that's about all I could get. So the verse itself is about understanding how to move in this world, and how to move in this world in a way that isn't degrading, isn't deleterious, and allows you to thrive like a lotus and live in this world but not be of this world, and answer all the biggest questions of life throughout the course of your life, and know when to move, when to sit back and do nothing, how to move, what's valuable, what direction you should be headed in at all times, what a true north is. It's big stuff. I had a thought last night. I was driving home from Long Beach with my wife, and we're in the car, and I had a thought I just picked this verse because the thought I had relates nicely to the verse. One of the profundities that makes karma gati, the path of karma, gahana, difficult to fathom, profound, is this. We like to think of karma as this static thing of stuff that happens to you. You commit a murder, therefore someone's going to kill you. You steal $100 here, therefore you're going to get sick there, or you're going to have somebody steal $100 from you. Maybe it's the exact same thing you did happens to you, or something which on some like great karma scale out in the universe somewhere near Pluto. Then, on the great karma scale, it kind of equalizes the karma scale. This is how most people think of karma. What I don't think that all of it, and so therefore something bad, it's your karma. I think one important way to understand karma is that karma is what happens to you when your karma in the sense of reaction, because karma means action, but your karma in the sense of reaction, which is normally called karma phala in Sanskrit, the fruit of karma. But there is one place in the Gita where the word karma is used to refer to the reaction. It's just not the primary way. 50, 80 instances where it's used to refer to action, one where a secondary meaning could be reaction. But almost always karma phala is used, the fruit of your karma, the results of your karma, the results of your action, a reaction. But do you take in that secondary meaning of a reaction? Your karma, your reaction, is what happens to you when you're doing everything just right. Let me give you an example. If you're driving down the road and you're doing everything as it's supposed to be, and some guy comes out of nowhere and whacks you, and you didn't do anything to deserve it, that would be your karma. Because I didn't meander, or I didn't go into the flow of oncoming traffic, or I wasn't drunk, or I wasn't driving poorly. Legally, you're not accountable for such a crime. You didn't do anything wrong. You were driving and following the rules. So there's no shared blame. You're 100% exonerated. The person who hit you wears all the blame. This whole idea of karma and what's your responsibility, what's the other person's responsibility, what should you have done, what should not, this is woven into our legal system, and you get punished when you don't do what you're supposed to do. Even sometimes doing nothing is seen as negligence, willful negligence. We have different degrees of murder, because when somebody dies, they have different levels of blame. Were you taking their life on purpose? Was it in the heat of the moment? Had enough time passed where a normal person would have cooled down? Were you afraid for your life? Was it an unavoidable accident? Were you negligent in some way? Were you intoxicated? All these things factor into the different degrees of murder when a life is taken, because assigning blame is critical for assigning punishment and restitution, and what remunerates the party that was offended, or what fixes things. And it really, like Athena, the justice scale, it's a blind woman holding a scale, and the scale is blind. Justice is blind. It's for everybody. It's equal for everybody. At least in theory, that's what it's supposed to be. So, your reaction, your consequences, is what happens to you when you're doing everything right. However, most of the time, it's not like that. Most of the time, it's not like that. Most of the time, a better example would be this. You have a pot of blue dye. You then add blue dye to that blue dye pot of dye, and you end up with more blue dye. But if instead of adding blue dye to that pot, you choose to add red dye to that pot, then you wind up with purple. However, if you've added a lot of blue and then you add just a little tiny bit of red, then it might be a really dark, almost bluish purple. If you had equal amounts, it's a purple. If you had way more red than that blue, though, you just had a little pot of blue, you added a bunch of red, it might end up almost like a maroon color. If you add yellow, you end up with green. A lot of yellow starts to look really almost yellowish, like a super light green. You have blue again, it gets darker. I just thought of another verse from the 14th chapter about how each one of the gunas is fighting for supremacy. Blue, I'm feeling blue, mode of ignorance. I'm feeling sunny, yellow, mode of goodness, sattva and tamas. And then rajas is I'm seeing red. Red, blue, and yellow as the three primary gunas in color, in one version of color theory, that then gets you your unlimited colors. And the 14th chapter speaks about the gunas constantly vying with each other for supremacy. So a better way to look at most of what happens to us in our life is we have a certain amount of karma that we're going to have to experience. But we're always adding to that pot of color. And sattva, rajas, and tamas, simply put, is sattva uplifts you and clarifies things. Tamas degrades you and obfuscates things and opaques them. And rajas is sort of like this worldly, kind of keeps things in this world of birth, death, old age, and disease, maybe at least in the human species. Sometimes if you were thinking what's rajasic, what's passionate. Rajas means passion. We thought a night on the town. People are going out for a night in town. A night in the town is tamas. People are getting intoxicated, having illicit sex, and eating things they shouldn't be eating. That's tamas. That's like pure tamas. Rajas is piety, but materially motivated piety. Sattva is piety that's not materially motivated, that's done just because it should be done. That's all clarified in the 17th chapter of the Gita, but I don't want to take away from class too much in the direction I'm going in. So you can be uplift, keep it the same, or degrade it. Goodness, passion, ignorance, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And we shouldn't look at it like I have some karma coming to me. We should look at it, I got a little pot of karma, and I'm now adding to that pot all day long, every day. If you fell off a building, it was my karma, and the person's you jumped off the building. Maybe it's your karma, but it's your, to quote John Lennon, it's your instant karma. It's just the consequence of your action, which isn't super difficult to fathom. Hey, tell Jaddev he's got to stop. It's just what it is. It's your instant karma, which isn't profound or difficult to understand. If you jump off a building and break your legs and you're vexed about it and talking about, oh, that must have been my karma, people think you're a fool. It's obvious. Usually we use ideas like karma when it's more remote and more complicated and more convoluted and more difficult to fathom. We don't really need to worry too much about this unrealized pot of karma we've got coming to us because we can't really do anything about the past. One of our theologians said, forget the past, it sleeps, nor the future dream at all, but concentrate on times that are with thee, and progress ye shall call. was written in the 1870s by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of our theologians, who took the trouble to learn English so that he could minister to people in the West. Sent his books all over the world, even to Ralph Waldo Emerson, who he was a contemporary of. And he came up with these pithy, really cool English poeticisms, rhyming English poetry. Who does that, right? The pot that's you've already done, you can focus what you can do now. Maybe you figure that out and you know what to do now, but in general, do good things now. It's pretty obvious panacea for whatever ails you. Do healthy, uplifting, selfless good things now. And when you get a little shush! My kids. When you get a mixed reaction, then you understand there was some other ink in that pot that caused that mixed reaction. One thing is, what's over here is over there, but you can focus on this, but we don't think like that. We think, oh, I got this karma and I can't work it out. But that's not true. You're just adding more and more blue dye, more and more red dye. And now you got gallons of it instead of a pint of it. You should be focusing on what's right there in front of you. And so we're actually creating our reaction all the time by what we choose to do with our life, whether we're turning towards the light or away from the light. Matamasa Jyotirgamaya, the old Veda says, not towards the darkness, move towards the light. Did you guys follow this? I think it's a better way of looking at karma. You have some store of karma, and that may manifest in myriad different ways. That may manifest in myriad different ways. And you're adding good, bad, and ugly to that pot at all times. And that you have unlimited control over. And then this gets manifested totally differently depending on what you're doing right here. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And we have a solution in front of us, and that we can start to repair things. We can start to fix things. We can start to move forward. We can start to uplift ourselves and our communities anytime we want to. And that's magic. At least for me, this was a profound realization yesterday. I'm 48. I've been around this text for the bulk of my life, more than 2/3 of my life, daily. But I had this realization last night, and for me it was profound. It simplified things. It also took karma away from being this static list of things you're going to have to experience and made it into this melting pot of experience that you'll have to have that constantly changes based on what you're choosing to do in the here and now. Now, couldn't all-powerful, ergo, all-knowing, all-powerful being adjudicate an unlimited amount of people having unlimited different types of karma that were being mixed together infinity times infinity, infinity times over? Could an omniscient being navigate that one and figure it out and give everybody just what they deserved, exactly as they deserved it, in a way which kept the door open for them to uplift themselves? Certainly. That's the meaning of omniscience. Could we fully understand all the intricacies? No, but if you understand this point I just made, it's a linchpin that helps you move forward in your life. That deparalyzes you and allows you to, with some confidence, start to uplift yourself, start to improve yourself. Because the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that's something you guys can remember tomorrow. The other thing is that the Gita does not teach us to uplift ourselves with sattva. The Gita teaches us to become nishkarma, free from all karma. Bhakti is not sattva. It's not merely uplifting in this material tabernacle. Rather, it's transcendent. Krishna never recommends you to be in the mode of sattva. He never recommends you to do things in the mode of sattva. Most of our commentators for 1,500 years have said you should cultivate the mode of sattva. And certainly reading the Gita, the stuff that's sattva sounds like a to-do list of any upwardly mobile, spiritually minded individual. But Krishna never directly says you should cultivate sattva. Rather, he says repeatedly, over and over again, you should become free from all karma, nishkarma. Not akarma, which is just not acting, but nishkarma, beyond karma, devoid of karma. And that's bhakti. And Krishna goes as far as to say, aham tvam sarva papebhya mokshayishami. Mokshayishami is the first person future tense desiderative of moksha, which means to liberate. I will liberate you. First person, future tense. Desiderative, that's not desiderative. First person, future tense. I will liberate you. I will liberate you. What will I liberate you from? Sarva papebhya, all your sins. Aham, I will do it. Tvam, to you. What will I do? I'll liberate you from all your sins. If if you just do the thing that came before it, which is sarva dharman prityajya. If you give up all dharma, mam ekam shadanam braja, and you go take shelter of me alone. If you just take shelter of me completely, do that one thing. Ekam means one thing. Do that one thing, then I'll take responsibility for all your karma. Could an omnipotent being do such a thing? Yes. Would he? Sure. If you had no reason to get any of your karma, to learn any lessons, if you learned all the lessons which are surrendered to Krishna and move with him, then that's it. You won the race. That's all you need to do. Krishna consciousness is really about dedicating ourselves to becoming nishkarma through loving God and solving all problems by solving one problem. Removing lust, anger, and greed from our heart by loving Krishna so much that we don't want or need anything for ourselves anymore. By dealing with all of the inebrities that plague us incessantly, by filling our cup up with Krishna. And there's so much clear that whatever blue or yellow or red was there becomes insignificant. Just like people go pee in the ocean. We're polluting our oceans, but we're not polluting our oceans because we pee in them. The whole world go and pee in the ocean. It's not that big of a deal. People have been peeing in the ocean for all time. It's not like, oh my God, the urea content of the oceans is just getting so high, it's a problem. Forget these, 100-mile trash heaps that are floating through the ocean, toxic chemicals and stuff like that. It's just this incredible amount of uric acid that's just plaguing our oceans. It's not like that. You can go pee in the ocean and surf in the same ocean. Don't worry about it. Right? And people even pee in swimming pools. But what to speak of oceans? And so Krishna adds so much volume, if you love Krishna, that whatever lust, anger, and greed, whatever tamas and rajas and sattva you had coloring your palate just gets washed away and it becomes clear, perfectly clear. Shuddha sattva, completely pure goodness. You can look at Krishna consciousness as goodness without any tinge of self-interest. Therefore, as you're moving towards goodness, you're moving towards Krishna consciousness. But it's really like being in an airport gets you on an airplane. You could be at the airport all day and night, and unless you buy a ticket, you're not on an airplane. You're not going to leave the earth. Krishna consciousness is that airplane. The mode of goodness is the airport. It certainly helps, but it's not the same thing. Not by a long shot. It's normative. Usually you go to the airport, get on an airplane. Not absolutely essential. And so although we say Shuddha Sattva, sometimes in our literature, pure goodness, not in the Gita, but in other Vedic literature like the Bhagavatam, really that only partially tells the story. It's pure goodness in the sense of categorically different than mere goodness, but resembling it to some extent. So, my guru taught a class when I was a wee lad. It inspired me to join the Hare Krishna movement, but I don't really remember anything about it. I just remember him saying the word, Vikaramanaha, Gahana, and then essentially telling me, you know what you're doing wrong, you know what you need to change. And that was it. And I was like, went home, spun out, and my whole life changed in an instant. And my mind wasn't big enough to hold what he was saying. And now I'm, almost 10 years older than he was when he spoke that class to me. Anyway, he's light years ahead of me then compared to where I am now, but it's just bizarre. And now I teach classes and people can't quite figure out what I'm saying, and they tell me one sentence I said and how it was profound. I'm like, really? That's all you got? Like, I put all this time to structure my thought logically and going through the process, and that's what you got out of it, like a one-liner? Should I just sit up here and just say one-liners? Just string a bunch of one-liners together and give you guys a grab bag and you get what you need and go home? But the verse is there. What should you do? What should you not do? And how inaction can also be enmeshing and entangling. And I thought about it, a way to look at karma, which sometimes seems so disempowering and faded. It's faded. You can't do anything about it. Fated, not faded like your jeans are faded, but fated. And it seems really disempowering and real deterministic. But the reality is that karma is like a little pot of dye, whatever color. And then you're adding new colors to it all the time. And it's changing. And that leaves open myriad different ways that karma could manifest in your life, depending on what you do now. It's a much more empowered way to look at karma. And then we have to look at the reality that Krishna consciousness is not considered in the Gita or in the Vedic literature generally conceived. It's not considered to be in the realm of karma. Good, bad, or ugly, blue, yellow, or red, sattva, rajas, or tamas. It's none of them. It's spiritual. And that understanding leads you to really value how magical Krishna consciousness is. It's a panacea, it's a linchpin, it's a skeleton key, it's a philosopher's stone, it's a fountain of youth, it's an elixir of immortality, it's a universal solvent, it's everything you could ever need to solve every problem of life. If your life is dedicated to loving Krishna, if you're regularly engaged in activities which promote that, Krishna's grace will wash over you like an ocean of clear. And the colors will just disappear. And he'll take responsibility for it. Normally we're not quite ready for that. So we dabble a little bit and we get like a few buckets of clear and it makes everything infinitely better. but we've still got a few things we need to work out, and we got to dabble and play and deviate a little bit and step off the straight and narrow and learn a few lessons along the way. But for a devotee, there's usually just kind of these gallons of clarity that are poured on everything, and the whole world becomes kind of translucent and almost like watercolors. There's no deep pigment. The whole thing becomes a little watercolors. You can kind of see through it all and see Krishna's hand behind everything, and you can see Krishna helping you. I needed that, and I needed that, and I had to learn this lesson. It all becomes kind of clear, and it just, everything just becomes a lot more translucent. Maybe not quite transparent, but at least becomes translucent. You can see through it like with a watercolor. You can kind of see what's going on. It's not so opaque and thick and impenetrable. All right, that was me working with that, what got to be somewhat complicated metaphor for quite some time. But I think it really paints a picture that has a lot of value, and it leaves us empowered and challenged. Empowered because we're adding to that color palette all the time. And challenged because we can step off anytime we want to into a whole nother universe. Final thoughts? Yeah.
I really appreciate the imagery. It helps me to conceptualize karma much easier to have that image in my mind, and it is very empowering, like you mentioned, to think that I can directly impact the karma, and then the translucent paint that you're throwing in there. I've had a little bit of that through my whatever experience I have.
Devotees universally have the experience. Did you hear what he said, Leela? He said he liked the image. He liked the metaphor. It helped. And he also said that the idea of translucence was appreciated. The one thing was empowering, and the translucent thing, he's even had some experience of it. It's Ross talking. So, yeah, universally, devotees have an experience where they still, quote unquote, get their karma, but it's just different. It's uplifting, it's educational, it's clear, It's like easy to fathom. They can wrap their heads around. They can own it. They can move forward with it. It doesn't become paralyzing. And it's karma light. Krishna gives you just enough to learn your lessons and move forward. You almost get this feeling like Krishna's really holding you by the hand. There's an Irish, you ever heard Irish people speaking? It's like a foreign language. Even when they're speaking English, it's a foreign language. When they're speaking Gaelic, it is literally a foreign language. But there's this old Gaelic, I'm assuming it's Gaelic. I don't know. I've never read the original language of it, but it's may the road rise up to meet you. You're walking like down a steep hill or something like that. It's kind of painful. May the road rise up to meet you, or you're just kind of walking on even ground. It's real easy. You just take a step and the road's just right there, and it's like your journey is very easy. May the road rise up to meet you. You guys know this one? May the wind be always at your back. If you're walking into the wind, it slows you down. You get way more drag. But the wind's at your back. The road's rise up to meet you. The wind's at your back. It's like running that race just became a whole lot easier. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. I've always wondered, because like if you're riding a sailboat and you want to actually sail into the wind, you can't do it. You can sail to the side and then back. You got to kind of do this. You can't just directly sail into the wind. So the wind's at your back, though. You just cast your sail. You just go like a beeline right where you want to go. May the wind be always at your back. May the road rise up to meet you, and the wind be always at your back, and the rain fall gently upon your fields. And the Vedas, in auspicious situations, you go to sleep and it rains, you wake up and everything's been rained on, but you don't have to experience the rain during your day. And so the rain fall gently. It's not making a flood. It's not ruining everything. It's not creating a bunch of mud and sludge, and too much rain becomes problematic. If your soil's real dry, too much rain just doesn't even penetrate. Just a little bit penetrates, a little bit more penetrates, a little bit more penetrates, and the soil becomes really fertile. If your soil's real fertile, then you can take a big rainfall and it'll sink in there good. But the soil's too dry, it won't even penetrate. You need that gradual rain, that drip. May the rain fall gently upon your fields. And may God hold you in the palm of his hand until we meet again. I think it's an Irish prayer for when somebody dies. And may God hold you in the palm of his hand. It's great imagery. It's patriarchal. Deal with it. We got matriarchal image as well. So they both have incredible value if you understand them properly. And it's super personalized. God has a hand. He can hold you in it. It doesn't compromise, in personifying God, it doesn't compromise God's omnipotence because God's holding you in the palm of his hand. There's also an intimacy. Somehow or other you manage to have a giant, but it's also sweet and intimate. Until we meet again brings up ideas of eternity and changes the nature of the dialogue substantially. It changes your conception of self. It's a beautiful poem. That idea of may God hold you in the palm of his hand is how devotees experience karma. Krishna's holding you in his hand, bringing you closer, teaching you what you need, doling out just what you need to teach you those lessons because you're still a dabbler and you haven't really signed up for the master's course yet, but he's still giving you just tons of lakes of kindness along the way until you're ready to dive in the ocean. You gotta yell at me.
I was also thinking what you said about fully surrendering to Krishna and removing all your karma. To me, it brings an image of like the ability to make almost like a cosmic leap forward.
Yeah, we have that power to make a cosmic leap forward. We have that level of power. There's that saying, here's one you can remember from class. You're not afraid of being insignificant. You're afraid that you're infinitely powerful. Because if you're infinitely powerful, then you've got huge responsibility. And living a life of quiet desperation becomes pathetic and beneath you. If you're just a regular, sorry sap of a soul, and you live a life of quiet desperation and pathos, what's the big deal? But if you're a giant, capable of doing huge, cosmically shifting things, and you don't, then that's a tragedy. And so the fear isn't that you're weak, it's that you're infinitely powerful. And so this understanding, and it's true, devotees experience it. It's a reasonable theory. If you do some experimentation with it, you'll find it to be true. Really true. Such that somebody can say, I've been coming around for a year or two and I've already experienced this on some level. Cry out in kirtan. I'll finish with this, a little anecdote you guys can remember. Some palm reader came or some astrologer came. Somebody came to the temple and asked Prabhupada to read his palm in Mumbai. And the devotees heard this. And they were just like, oh God. They wanted to bounce the guy out. To ask Srila Prabhupada to read their palm. And Prabhupada said, yeah, let me see. And he looked at the guy's palm and said, oh. And the guy was like spinning right down the spot. And then Prabhupada said, very bad. The guy's quaking now. Prabhupada said, birth, death, old age, and disease. And then he slapped it. But you clap in kirtan and all the lines will change. That's also a verse. There's a book called the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It was composed 5 centuries ago. And it said if you clap your hands during kirtan, then the birds of sinful activities fly away immediately. We shouldn't misunderstand how powerful grace is, how powerful a tradition of grace is. Ours is sometimes called the Pushti Marg. There's another group of Vaishnavas called the Pushti Margis, the path of nourishment, the path of grace. But one of our theologians says you can also call us Pushti Marg. We shouldn't mistake what happens when you interface with an all-good, all-powerful deity. Magic is sure to occur. Miracles are sure to happen. Kirtan is powerful. Puja is powerful. Our scriptures are illuminating like the sun. The devotees are like suns. They illuminate and purify. Our temples, our holy places, the 5 things we talked about last week, these are incredibly powerful items. They have the power to change your life. Let's experiment with that now and do a little kirtan. Thank you so very much. Hare Krishna.